Have you ever noticed that no matter how much you try to solve your life through thinking, the thinking itself becomes the problem? You sit down, perhaps in the evening, perhaps in a quiet moment between tasks, and instead of finding rest, you find a courtroom. A loud, relentless courtroom inside your own skull. There is a prosecutor presenting every mistake you have ever made. There is a defense attorney scrambling to justify your choices. There is a jury of imagined opinions from people who are not even in the room. And you, somewhere in the middle of all of this noise, are exhausted, not from what has happened to you, but from the sheer weight of thinking about what has happened to you. This is where most human beings live. Not in the world, but in the story about the world that the mind is constantly generating. And the tragedy is not that life is hard. The tragedy is that most of the hardness is happening in a dimension that does not even exist, which is the past that is already gone and the future that has not yet arrived. So let us begin here. Let us begin with the most honest thing that can be said about the human condition. You are suffering, not because of your circumstances, but because of your relationship with your own mind. And that relationship, once you truly see it, can change in an instant. There is a voice in your head, you know the one, it comments on everything, it judges the people around you.
It replays conversations from 3 years ago and imagines how you should have responded. It worries about a version of tomorrow that may never come.
It tells you that you're not enough, or that you're too much, or that things should be different than they are. It is never quiet, it is never satisfied. And for most of your life you have assumed, without ever questioning this assumption, that this voice is you. But here's the question that changes everything if you can hear the voice who is doing the hearing. Think about that for a moment. If there's a voice speaking and there's something in you that is aware of that voice, then you cannot be the voice. You are the awareness, you are the one who notices. You are the space in which the thinking is happening, not the thinking itself. This distinction, as simple as it sounds, is the beginning of everything. It is the crack in the wall through which the light enters. Most people, when they first encounter this idea, feel a kind of strange relief, as if they have been carrying a heavy backpack for years and someone has just pointed out that they can take it off. The thoughts are still there, the voice is still there, but there is suddenly a little distance, a little breathing room, and in that space something entirely different becomes possible. Now let us look more carefully at what the mind actually does, because understanding the mechanism, it is the first step to being free of it. The mind, in its ordinary unconscious state, is not your friend.
This is a difficult thing to hear because we have been taught that intelligence is the highest virtue, that thinking is the solution to every problem, that the more we analyze and plan and strategize, the better our
lives will be. And there is some truth in this, in the practical domain of life. If you need to build a bridge, you need to think. If you need to plan a journey, you need to think. Thinking is a magnificent tool. But here is the problem. The mind does not know when to stop. It is like a hammer that insists on treating everything as a nail. You finish work and the mind keeps working. You lie down to sleep and the mind holds a conference. You try to enjoy a beautiful sunset and the mind is already somewhere else, planning, worrying, comparing, judging. The tool has taken over the workshop. And the craftsman, which is you, the aware, conscious being underneath all of that noise, has been forgotten. This is what we might call the fundamental dysfunction of the ordinary human mind. It is not a flaw in your character. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you specifically. It is the condition of almost every human being walking this earth. The difference between those who suffer greatly and those who find peace is not the absence of thoughts. It is the degree to which they are identified with those thoughts. Identification, that is the key word. When you are fully identified with your thinking, every thought feels like a fact. Every fear feels like a prophecy. Every self-critical thought feels like the truth about who you are. You're not having thoughts. You are being had by them. You are inside the river, being swept along, and you do not even know there is a riverbank. And this is where time enters the picture. Because the mind's greatest trick, the deepest illusion it creates, is the illusion of psychological time. Now physical time is real. The clock moves, the seasons change. You are born, you grow, you age. This is the reality of time in the physical world, and it is entirely valid. But psychological time is something different. Psychological time is the mind's habit of living everywhere except here. Watch what the mind does. It takes a painful memory from the past, perhaps a rejection, a failure, a loss, and it carries it into the present moment. It says, this is who you are, this is your story, this is the evidence of your inner decadence. And so the past, which is gone, which exists now only as a thought, becomes a prison. You're not living in the past, you're living in a thought about the past. But because you are fully identified with that thought, it feels completely real. It feels like now. And then the mind turns to the future. The future becomes the place where salvation is supposed to arrive. When I get the job, I will be happy. When the relationship is fixed, I will feel at peace. When I lose the weight, when I have more money, when the children grow up, when things settle down, then I will begin to live. Then I will be okay. And so the present moment, this moment, the only moment that is ever actually real, is treated as an obstacle, as something to get through, as a waiting room before real life begins. But here is the truth that the mind cannot accept. The future never arrives as the future. When the thing you are waiting for finally comes, it comes as a present moment. And if you have not learned to be present, if you have not broken the habit of always projecting your awareness into the next moment, you will simply find something new to wait for. The mind will find a new horizon to chase, because the mind does not want you to be at peace in the present. A peaceful present mind is a quiet mind. And the mind in its unconscious state is deeply addicted to its own activity. This is a radical thing to say, and I want you to sit with it. The mind is addicted to its own noise, not because it is evil, not because you're broken, but because the mind has learned over thousands of years of human evolution to treat every moment as a potential threat, every unknown as a danger, every gap in certainty as something to be filled with analysis. This was useful once when the threat was a predator in the forest, but now the predator is gone, and the mind is still running the same program. It is searching for danger in a conversation from last Tuesday. It is preparing defenses against a confrontation that may never happen. It is solving problems that do not exist yet, just in case, and you pay for this with your life, not your life in the dramatic sense. But the actual texture of your lived experience, the moments of genuine peace, genuine connection, genuine aliveness that are available in every single ordinary moment. You miss them because the mind is elsewhere. Now I want to introduce something that may feel a little uncomfortable at first, but stay with it because it is one of the most liberating insights you can ever encounter. There is a part of your psychological structure that does not want to heal. There's a part of you that is deeply invested in your own suffering. Not because you are masochistic, not because you enjoy pain in any conscious way, but because your pain has become your identity, your story of what happened to you, the ways you were wronged, the losses you suffered, the ways life has been unfair. This story is not just something you have, it is something you are as far as the ego is concerned. This is what we might call the pain body. It is the accumulated emotional residue of every unresolved hurt, every suppressed grief, every moment of anger that was never fully felt and released. It lives in you as a kind of energetic presence, and it is not passive, it feeds, it needs to sustain itself. And the way it sustains itself is by pulling your attention into painful thoughts, by triggering situations that confirm your suffering, by making you relive old hurts and imagine new ones. You have probably noticed this. There are moments when you feel relatively calm, relatively okay, and then something small happens, a word from someone, a memory that surfaces, a piece of news, and suddenly you're not just slightly upset.
You are overwhelmingly, disproportionately upset. The emotion seems far larger than the situation warrants. That is the pain body activating.
That is the accumulated weight of old, unprocessed emotion, using the present moment as a doorway to flood your awareness. And here's the most insidious part: when the pain body is active, it takes over your thinking. Your thoughts become dark, heavy, catastrophic. And because you are identified with your thoughts, you believe them. You think this is the truth, this is reality, things really are this bad. But what is actually happening is that you are seeing the present moment through the lens of accumulated past pain. You're not seeing clearly, you're seeing through a filter made of old wounds. The pain body also feeds on drama, on conflict, on the kind of emotional intensity that comes from arguments, from grievances, from replaying injustices. This is why some people, without any conscious intention, seem to create chaos around them. It is not who they truly are. It is the pain body seeking its food. It is the unexamined, unobserved emotional residue of the past trying to perpetuate itself. And the only thing that can dissolve it, the only thing that has ever dissolved it, is the light of conscious awareness. Not analysis, not fighting it, not trying to think your way out of it, but simply clearly, compassionately seeing it, observing it without becoming it. This brings us to the most important shift in this entire conversation. The shift from being lost in the mind to being the one who watches the mind. This is the awakening. Not a dramatic lightning bolt event, though it can feel that way sometimes, but a quiet, profound recognition that you are not the content of your consciousness, you are consciousness itself. Let me describe this as simply as possible. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there is thinking happening. There may be agreement, or resistance, or curiosity, or doubt. There are feelings in the body, perhaps tension, perhaps openness. There are sounds around you, there are sensations. All of this is content appearing in the field of your awareness. But the awareness itself, the space in which all of this is appearing, is not content. It is the container. It is the screen on which the movie of your mind is playing, and you are the screen, not the movie. When you recognize yourself as the awareness rather than the thoughts, something shifts immediately. The thoughts do not stop, but they lose their absolute grip on you. You can watch a thought arise, move through awareness, and dissolve without being dragged into it. You can feel an emotion without being consumed by it. You can hear the voice in your head without believing every word it says. This is what the ancient traditions have pointed to for thousands of years under many different names: the witness, the observer, pure awareness, presence. It is not a concept to be understood intellectually. It is a living reality to be recognized directly, and you can recognize it right now in this moment, simply by noticing that you are the one who is aware. There is something in you that is reading these words. There is something that is aware of the room you're in. There is something that notices when your mind wanders and brings it back, that something is not a thought. It is not an emotion. It is not a memory. It is prior to all of those things. It is the ground of your being, and it is completely, utterly undisturbed by whatever is happening in your life right now. This is not a spiritual fantasy. This is not a comforting story to make you feel better. This is the most direct, most intimate truth of your own experience. Before the thought, there is awareness. Before the emotion, there is the space that holds it. Before the story of who you are, there is the one who is aware of the story. And here's what is remarkable about this awareness. It does not suffer. It does not worry. It does not feel inadequate or afraid or lost. It simply is. It is the stillness beneath the movement. It is the silence beneath the noise. And it is always here. It has always been here. Even in your darkest moments, even in your most frantic overthinking, even in your deepest grief, this awareness was present, watching, holding, being. You have simply been too busy being lost in the content to notice the container. Now let us talk about how to actually live this, because there is a danger in spiritual teachings of creating a beautiful idea that floats somewhere above ordinary life, completely disconnected from the moment when you're stuck in traffic or arguing with someone you love, or lying awake at 3 a.m. with a mind that will not stop. The practice, if we can call it that, is not something you do for an hour in the morning and then forget about. It is a continuous, gentle returning. A returning to the present moment, to the body, to the breath, to the simple fact of being here. Begin with the body. The body is always in the present moment. The body does not worry about next year. The body does not regret last decade. The body is here, now, breathing, feeling, sensing. When the mind is racing, the body is your anchor. You can feel your feet on the floor. You can feel the weight of your hands in your lap. You can take one breath, not as a technique, not as a method to achieve something, but as a simple return to what is actually happening right now. This is not escapism. This is not avoiding your problems. Your problems, the real ones, the ones that require action, will still be there, and you will deal with them far more effectively from a place of presence than from a place of anxious circular thinking. But the imaginary problems, the ones the mind generates about a future that may never come, the ones that exist only as mental projections, those begin to lose their power when you're rooted in the now. There is also the practice of observation. When you notice that the voice in your head is speaking instead of immediately believing it, try something different. Simply notice it. Say to yourself, inwardly, quietly, I notice there is a thought happening. I notice there is worry. I notice there's self-criticism. You're not fighting the thought. You're not trying to replace it with a positive thought. You're simply stepping back ever so slightly into the position of the one who notices. And that tiny step, that micro movement of awareness, is the beginning of freedom, because you cannot be fully identified with something you're observing. The moment you see the thought as a thought rather than as reality, it begins to lose its hypnotic power. It is still there, but it is like watching a cloud pass across the sky. You're not the cloud, you're the sky. This is why judgment is such a trap. When the mind produces a dark thought, a fearful thought, a shameful thought, the instinct is to judge it, to say, I should not be thinking this. What is wrong with me? And then you have a thought about the thought, and a judgment about the judgment, and suddenly you are 10 layers deep in a mental labyrinth of your own making. The alternative is radical acceptance. Not acceptance in the sense of approving of the thought or surrendering to it, but acceptance in the sense of allowing it to be there without fighting it. What you resist persists. What you observe with equanimity begins to dissolve. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths of inner work. The way out is not through resistance, it is through presence. When you bring clear, non-judgmental awareness to a thought, to an emotion, to a sensation, you are no longer feeding it with the energy of your resistance. You're simply seeing it, and in that seeing, a kind of alchemy happens. Emotion is felt fully, and in being fully felt, it moves through. The thought is seen clearly, and in being clearly seen, it loses its urgency. The pain body, that accumulated weight of old emotion, cannot survive in the light of conscious awareness. It can only survive in the darkness of unconscious identification. When you see it, when you recognize it as an energetic pattern within you, rather than as the truth of who you are, you have already begun to dissolve it, not through effort, not through willpower, but through the simple, powerful act of seeing. Now let us talk about the ego, because the ego is the great architect of suffering, and it is important to understand it with compassion rather than with condemnation. The ego is not evil. The ego is not your enemy. The ego is simply a thought-based sense of self. It is the story you have built about who you are, constructed from your history, your achievements, your failures, your relationships, your beliefs, your preferences. It is the character you play in the movie of your life, and there's nothing wrong with having a character. The problem arises when you forget that you are the actor, not the role. The ego's deepest fear is its own dissolution. It is terrified of the present moment, because in the pure present moment, in the simple, direct experience of now, there is no story. There is no past to define you, no future to protect you, no narrative to maintain, and the ego, which is made entirely of story, experiences this as a kind of death. This is why the mind creates so much noise. It is not random. The noise is the ego maintaining itself. Every time you get lost in thought, every time you're pulled into worrying about the future or ruminating about the past, the ego is feeding. It is sustaining its sense of existence through the continuity of the story. I am the person who was hurt by this. I am the person who is working toward that. I am the person who deserves better. I am the person who is not good enough. All of these statements, positive or negative, are the ego maintaining the fiction of a solid, continuous, separate self. And the deepest spiritual insight, the one that has been pointed to by every genuine wisdom tradition, is that this self, this ego self, this story-based identity, is not ultimately what you are. It is a structure that arose in consciousness, but you are the consciousness in which it arose. You are not the wave, you are the ocean that produced the wave. When this is truly seen, not just intellectually understood, but directly recognized, the fear begins to dissolve, because what you truly are cannot be threatened. What you truly are cannot be diminished by a failure or enhanced by a success. What you truly are is the awareness that watches both the failure and the success with equal spacious presence. It is not indifferent, it is not cold, it is in fact the source of the deepest compassion, because it sees clearly, without the distortion of ego, without the agenda of self-protection. The ego wants to be special, it wants to be better than, or it wants to suffer more than, it wants to be right, or it wants to be the most wronged, it wants recognition, or it wants to be the most misunderstood. Notice how even suffering can become a form of identity. Notice how even spiritual seeking can become an ego project. I am the person who is on a spiritual path. I am more aware than most people. I have been through so much. Even these stories are the ego finding new material to sustain itself. The recognition of this is not cause for shame. It is cause for gentle, amused awareness. You catch the ego in its game, and instead of condemning yourself for having an ego, you simply smile at it. There it is again, the old pattern, the old story. And in that moment of recognition, you are already free of it, at least for that moment. And moments of freedom accumulate, they deepen, they become the ground of your life rather than the exception. There is something I want to address directly, because it comes up for almost everyone who begins to explore these ideas. The question of what about my life? What about the real problems I need to solve? What about my responsibilities, my relationships, my goals? Is this teaching asking me to become passive, to accept everything without ever trying to change anything? The answer is a clear and definite no. Presence is not passivity. Awareness is not indifference. In fact, it is precisely the opposite. When you're fully present, when you're not lost in the noise of compulsive thinking, you become far more effective in the world. You see situations more clearly, you respond rather than react. You act from a place of genuine intelligence rather than from the distorted lens of fear and ego. The difference is this: action that comes from presence, from clarity, from a genuine response to what is needed in this moment. This is what we might call awakened action. It is purposeful, it is intelligent, it is often creative and surprisingly effective. But action that comes from anxiety, from the desperate need to control outcomes, from the ego's fear of what will happen if things do not go its way, this kind of action is frantic, exhausting, and often counterproductive. It creates more problems than it solves because it is not responding to reality. It is responding to the mind's story about reality. So yes, make your plans, take your actions, pursue what matters to you. But do it from here. Do it from this moment. Do it with the full aliveness of your presence rather than from the half-life of anxious projection. You will find that things flow differently. Not magically, not without difficulty, but with a kind of grace that is simply not available to the compulsive thinker. And what about the past? What about the real things that have happened? The genuine losses, the real traumas, the actual injustices? Are we simply to forget them, to pretend they did not happen? No, the teaching is not about pretending. It is not about spiritual bypassing, which is the use of spiritual ideas to avoid feeling what needs to be felt. If there's grief, it needs to be grieved. If there's anger, it needs to be felt and expressed appropriately. The difference is between feeling an emotion and being lost in a story about the emotion. You can feel grief without becoming the story of the person who lost everything. You can feel anger without feeding it with mental narratives of revenge and injustice for years on end. Emotions, when they are fully felt in the body, without the mind's commentary and dramatization, move through. They complete themselves. They arise, they peak, they dissolve. It is the mind's constant narration, the why did this happen, the it should have been different, the I will never recover. It is this narration that freezes the emotion in place, that turns a natural process of feeling and healing into a chronic condition of suffering. The present moment is not asking you to be happy about what has happened. It is not asking you to pretend that pain is not pain. It is simply asking you to be here with what is without the additional layer of resistance and story that the mind adds to every experience, because that additional layer is where the real suffering lives, not in the raw experience itself, but in the mind's rejection of the experience. There's a beautiful simplicity on the other side of all of this. When you stop fighting the present moment, when you stop insisting that life should be different than it is, not forever, not in the sense of giving up, but in this moment, in this breath, in this simple act of allowing what is to be what it is, something opens, a kind of relief, a kind of ease, the tightness in the chest loosens, the jaw unclenches, the shoulders drop, the body, which has been bracing against reality, remembers that it is safe to simply be. This is not the peace of having solved all your problems. This is a deeper peace, a peace that does not depend on circumstances. A peace that is always available underneath the noise, beneath the story, prior to the thinking. It is the peace of your own true nature, the stillness that has always been there waiting for you to notice it. The mind will tell you that this is too simple, that real peace must be earned, must be achieved, must come at the end of a long and difficult journey. The mind will tell you that you're not ready, that you have too much to work through first, that you need to understand more, fix more, become more before you can rest. This is the mind protecting its own territory. This is the ego maintaining its position as the manager of your life. But the truth is embarrassingly simple. The peace you're looking for is not somewhere else. It is not in the future. It is not at the end of a self-improvement project. It is here. It is now. It is the very awareness in which this moment is appearing. You do not need to travel anywhere to find it. You only need to stop traveling away from it. Every moment of genuine presence, every moment when you're fully here, fully aware, not lost in thought, is a moment of that peace. You have had these moments. Everyone has a moment in nature when the mind went quiet and there was just the sound of wind, just the light on the water, just the simple miracle of being alive. a moment of complete absorption in something you love, when time seemed to stop and there was only the activity itself. A moment of deep connection with another person, when the stories fell away and there was just two beings present with each other and something wordless passed between you. These moments are not accidents. They are not gifts from some external source. They are what happens naturally when the mind steps aside. They are glimpses of your own true nature. And the spiritual path, if we can call it that, is simply the deepening of those glimpses into a more continuous recognition. You do not have to wait for the perfect moment. You do not have to be in a quiet room. You do not have to have your life sorted out. You can be in the middle of a difficult day, in the middle of a challenging situation, and still find this. Not by escaping the situation, but by being fully, completely present within it. By feeling the aliveness in your hands, by noticing the breath moving through the body, by recognizing that underneath whatever is happening, there is an awareness that is untouched, that is whole, that is here. This is the invitation, not to a belief system, not to a new set of ideas to add to the collection, but to a direct recognition of what you already are beneath the noise, beneath the story, beneath the endless commentary of the mind. You are awareness, you are presence, you are the stillness in which all of this movement is happening. And from that stillness, from that ground of being, everything becomes possible. Not in the sense of the ego's ambitions, but in the sense of genuine aliveness. The capacity to meet this moment fully, to feel it completely, to respond to it with intelligence and compassion and creativity, without the weight of the past dragging you backward or the anxiety of the future pulling you forward. There is a lightness available to you. Not the lightness of having nothing to carry, but the lightness of knowing that you are not the carrier, you are the space in which carrying happens. And the space is never burdened. The space is never tired. The space is never lost right now. In this moment, after everything that has been said, there is still just this, the sound of these words, the breath in the body, the simple, undeniable fact of being here. The mind may already be moving toward what comes next, planning how to apply this, wondering if it will work, preparing a response that is fine. Let it move, but underneath that movement, there's stillness, there's a quiet that does not come and go, a presence that was here before this conversation began and will be here when it ends. That presence is you. Not the you that the mind has constructed, not the you that the ego defends, but the you that simply is. The you that has always been here, patient and quiet and whole, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice you do not have to figure this out. You do not have to get it perfectly right. You do not have to transform yourself into a different kind of person. You only have to be willing to pause for just a moment in the middle of all the noise and the story and the relentless momentum of the thinking mind and ask who is aware of all of this. And in that pause, in that small, quiet, revolutionary pause, something recognizes itself, something that has no name, no history, no future, no problem, something that is simply, completely, peacefully here. That is where you have always been, underneath everything, before everything, as everything here, now, alive. And that is enough. That has always been enough. That will always be enough.